Whoa.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Enrichment Science Podcast. My name is Jason Crean, and I am always joined by my collaborator and partner in crime, Lara Joseph from the Animal Behavior Center.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Okay.
Um, Today we're kind of winging it, no pun intended, because before we got on, Lara was all fired up about enrichment. You want to just kind of talk about how you're feeling today and why?
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah.
Um, because right when we got this sat down for this meeting to record this episode, I was like, I am all fired up. I just got off a phone call with somebody talking about enrichment and people don't understand taking care of animals don't necessarily understand what enrichment is and its intention. And I told Jason, I said, I am all fired up. So I don't know if we just want to go with this one. So there's no script, there's nothing. So we decided to go with it. So here we are.
Yep.
And I am all fired up.
So let's talk about why. We threw a couple slides together just to capture our ideas about this. Um, Enrichment is a word that I think we hear a lot of people use, but they don't truly understand. Um, and I see it misused across the board, professional settings, those types of things, people's homes. It can be a challenge when you don't when you hear it enough and you're using it, but um, you're not real sure what it means. You know what I mean? It's hard. I have this problem with teaching vocabulary for the sake of teaching vocabulary. This is one of the reasons why I think we live in a scientifically illiterate society. And as you know, I have one foot in science education at all times, and we learn a lot of words, but application and context, we don't learn that. We're changing that. I'm changing that when it comes to how we learn about science. But this is a perfect example of what you and I see pretty regularly, where people are throwing terms around and not necessarily know what they mean.
Yep. And I know we were talking about this too. There's a term out there that I'm hearing used a lot, which is the term behavioral enrichment. And I know when I first heard that, I was like, what is that? Because all enrichment should affect behavior. And if enrichment is not affecting behavior, then it's just plain and simple, it's not enrichment. All behavior needs to focus on increasing an animal's quality of life through what you hear me. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir: choice, control, complexity, giving those animals a job to do, something to manipulate, something to experience, be a part of, to learn from, that increases their welfare, well being. Um, Not just an animal sitting there, because when red flags go off for me when I see an animal just sitting there. Is it doing something? Yeah, just sitting there, maybe resting. I'll be able to tell through observation, and the more I watch that animal, and if I come back an hour later and that animal's still resting, okay, maybe it did not get a good sleep last night. But if I come back 3 hours later and it's still sitting there, then we may have a problem. And what I'm doing is, okay, my attention is on you. Why are you just sitting there? Is it part of your natural behavior, like a sloth?
Mhm.
Um, or is this uncommon for this species of animal? It should be more active. And do I pay attention to things in the wild? Yes, I do. Um, I also pay attention to the individual and watch what are you doing? What aren't you doing? Why? And are you getting optimal care in many different aspects? But I really focus on, I mean, my area of focus is behavior, behavior training and enrichment, modifying behavior, avoiding abnormal repetitive behaviors, definitely avoiding um, scenarios where lack of enrichment could cause medical issues. Definitely avoiding those. Um, so, um, we can throw anything at an animal and call it enrichment. We can call it a vacuum sweeper if we want to. Um, call it whatever you want, but if the animal's not interacting with it and learning from it, then it's plain and simple, it's not enrichment. And I am pretty fired up right now because I was talking to somebody where we understand enrichment. We understand enrichment. We understand the benefit of enrichment. And when I see a situation where people can do better, I'm going to find out why it's not happening. And if it's because you need help, I'll be there to help you. Just say the word, I'll be there to help you. If it's because you don't have time, okay, then that's a management issue. And we can work with that as well. If it's because, hmm, it's not important, then I have an issue. Then I have an issue. And
Well, yeah, and I think and we have it on the slide, what enrichment is and what it's not. And what it's not is extra. It's not something additional. It's something that needs to be part of standard care. And because it's a critical component of animal welfare, it's not something that's just occasional fun. Which I think a lot of people view enrichment as. But enrichment is something that is, absolutely critical to the standard care, the daily care. It's not something that you just do once in a while for enrichment. Um, Once again, science education, there's a lot of things that are thrown in as enrichment, which is extra. And it's like, well, if it's that important, then why isn't it part of the standard curriculum? Why isn't it part of what we have people learn and do, right? So enrichment is not optional. It is not extra. It is not just some additional fun here and there. It is part of the standard care and needs to be accounted for all the time. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't require hours and hours of work on our part. It could be things that are simple, but if they don't have duration, then it's a quick activity and then it's done and then there's nothing more, right? And so we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is engaging them and keeping them engaged for duration, for a period of time, so that their mind and body is working. That's welfare. And that paper that I referred to in our previous episode, that was published in 2021, says, if we're looking at citizen parrot, welfare, we have to stop this ridiculousness of feeding a pellet as 80% of the diet, because we're stealing away so much enrichment from them. This is not what they're built to do. They're built to access different things in different ways, and foraging for hours every day. And instead, we're going to give them this bowl of food that's quote unquote nutritionally complete, which it's not, but so they can just eat what they want real quick and then they're done. Well, what do you do with the rest of the time, right? That's not enrichment. Enrichment needs to have duration. We need to be engaging them in different things. And there's hundreds of ways to do this with any animal.
yeah. And I was just asked last week, I was out of town all week working at some different organizations. And I will say, I was very impressed with each organization I went to. Number one, because of the questions they asked. Number two, what I saw. Number three, because I was there.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it was me. I don't care. Sorry. I don't care if it was me. I don't care if it was somebody else. Um, but I could tell they wanted to do better.
Mhm.
Um, so they had asked me, so do you not put bowls in animals' enclosures? And I was like, yeah, I do. I do. Especially if I can't be watching them all day, which I never am. I just make sure they're highly desired favored foods. Um, the well, it doesn't matter, are what they're working for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of putting food in different places, regardless of what it is. You know, one day you feed them on the floor, another day you feed them in an elevated bowl. The next day, maybe it's, everything's on a skewer. Um, Anything to keep them guessing, because when they become complacent, they become dependent upon certain things, and then they don't. It's just not enriching anymore. The environment is stagnant, and we don't want that because they're not wired for stagnancy. They're wired for change, and adapting every day to new things. And we got to make sure that we're, accounting for that.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I have a million things going through my head. Um, do we know what we're observing? You know what I mean? And I think, Jason, that's a lot. That's a lot. A lot of people will observe animals, but they don't understand what they're looking at.
Mhm.
So how do we inform them? How do we get to them? How do we help them understand? I want to see animals engaging. Both of us, we both do. We want to see animals thriving. Um, but I think a lot of like your common everyday person may not understand what they're looking at. Um, so how do we help them understand? And let me give an example. I put this picture of Bruce on the right, the alligator. I didn't get the whole thing in. I wanted to get the rest of the tail in there because how that tail is positioned will tell you, helps me identify what am I looking at. So obviously, I'm standing behind the gator. What I am seeing an alligator raised up on the front 2 feet. I can tell by the tracks on the concrete that he's been moving. Um, and this is a training session I was having with him. It's just a snapshot from a training session I was having with him. But what I'm doing is observing behavior. Obviously, I'm standing behind him. I am paying attention to see how his head is cocked sideways. He's looking at me. This can mean a couple of things because I'm taking a snapshot from a video. But what I'm seeing is he's raised off the front ground, so he's ready for movement. His tail is kind of off to the side, and it's ready for defending himself if he needs to. I don't want to put him in that position, but I was quickly walking around behind him because I needed to get to the other side of him. I know that's a behavior he wasn't comfortable with, thoroughly uncomfortable with, but it was a behavior I was shaping. So if I always tried to put myself in a position where I didn't have to walk behind him, but if I did, I was going to do it quickly so I could get back in his line of sight. But what I see is it's it's an alligator curious or cautious of something that's happening behind him. And that's how I break down behavior to see what are we observing. Um, I want to see animals moving, curious, interactive, learning, manipulating, eager for more,
Mhm. Yeah, engaged. Like I
engaged.
just want to see them engaged, and engaged like, um the mouse bird picture, that's Cecil, our mouse bird, next to Bruce there, and that's his reinforcer. He loves scritches right there, and we can get him to do all kinds of things. And whenever the doors open on his enclosure, he's on there and he's looking around. He's like, all right, what's next? Like you can tell he's ready for whatever's coming. And it's often like we'll have him fly to our hand or something like that. But that's like we get him engaged, and that's not a long behavior. That scritch is not a long behavior, but he will do anything for that with from anyone. But getting him engaged is critical, and just opening the enclosure and letting him land on the edge. He then starts looking around like, okay, I don't know what you're going to throw at me, but I'm ready. Not literally throw at you for anyone that's just tuning in, but what are we gonna put in front of him today that's going to get him active? Um, and if we're not fast enough to produce something, he flies to us. And mouse birds are pamprodactyl. They hang. They don't perch like a regular bird like we would think. They hang. So he'll fly to us and just hang on our clothes until we're ready to do whatever we're going to do with them. They're a hoot. But getting enriching, adding enrichment for him is fairly simple. He is not as how do I want to say this? He doesn't have the requirements, like the cognitive requirements of a parrot, who's literally sitting there thinking, and you can see the gears turning. Sirius on the left there, he does require, and he'll sit very calmly. And Lara, you've met him. He'll sit very calmly and just watch everything that's going on, and then he'll want to be part of it, and that's when he starts contact calling and swinging, and those types of things. um, with him, dietary enrichment is important. I tend to move his bowls around so that he's used to change. The type of foods vary quite a bit. The freeze-dried veggies there are one thing that we offer. And those different size pieces, which are different textures than the fresh stuff that we're feeding earlier in the day, adds enrichment because it's giving them something different to engage with, and how we present those often can be different. Putting it on a skewer, putting it in different foraging objects. That's a nice thing about these dried items, is you can do a lot more with them than wet food. But keeping them engaged, and that's their mind and body. The mind and body have to be engaged. So these are just some things I was thinking about I was listening to you all fired up, about, about enrichment, and how these things are not difficult to do. This does not take a long time to do. Um, it's just getting in the habit of making it part of your standard care, your standard welfare. How you're maintaining welfare for your critters, regardless of what they are.
Yeah, and if you're doing better, people observing the animals in your care, I can't tell you how many times after that I have heard people say, I was curious on the welfare of that animal. Um, and usually when they have those questions, if they just ask somebody, somebody should be able to tell them,
Yeah.
this is why we're doing this. This is why this animal is doing this or not doing this. Well, this is what we're working on. Ask,
Mhm.
ask. And that's how you're going to be able to tell if or get a better sense of the quality of care of that animal.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's so much room to do better. There's a lot of room to do better. And we're coming along. And I was just talking about this somewhere this morning, how um, a lot of people gravitate when they're looking at animals, they gravitate towards the elephants, the gorillas. Um, But once you start understanding the species, it is so amazing, from anything from reptiles, birds, fish, even insects, how they learn, how they move. And once we start understanding the animal better, we appreciate them and their role in the ecosystem a lot better.
Yeah.
So never stop trying, I guess. I was all fired up when we started, so
Yeah, and I mean, as a biologist, I know that always knowing what the wild is like is important because that's what these animals have adapted to. You can't just unwire an animal. I've said it thousands of times. So knowing about the wild is critically important. Knowing what they eat is critically important. Knowing how they spend their time, critically important because if we can't replicate and replace those behaviors, we're going to have problems. And we want to avoid stereotypical behaviors. We want to avoid boredom, things that we've talked about on previous episodes. But knowing what their life is like in the wild and how we can, um, even though life is much cushier with us, right? It's no predators, parasites, things like that we don't have to worry about. But knowing those things is important so that we can, um, keep them engaged.
yeah, and if we're going to sorry, I keep looking. I know I'm
Yeah.
expecting a delivery.
Yeah.
If we want our animals to be safe.
Mhm.
We want them to have the best medical care. We want them to have the room to explore. Um, and when we look at what I look at when I look at an animal is, okay, what does this animal do in the wild? How has it changed under my care? Um, what is not being replicated? And what is not being replicated, then I feel the need to fill that with something,
Mhm.
um, so the animal can thrive.
Yeah. And you can't treat them like people. You can't give them things that you think they'll like just because people like them. You got to meet the animal where they're at, and treat them like that animal because that's when you're going to have the best care. Treating them like people and giving them things that people like does not mean it's better. The anthropomorphism, we have a whole episode on that. We will probably do dozens more on that topic, but it is a
It,
problem.
and it's a controversial topic.
Yep.
I know it hits home. It hits hard with a lot of people, and that's not necessarily a bad thing
No.
because it creates questions when you're laying in bed at night. You think about this, and if it's thought provoking, not everybody has to be right, and not everybody's trying to be right. Let's just the more thoughts we provoke through conversations, even if we don't get along, it provokes our thought process. And maybe it might be like in another week, and sometimes it takes me that long that I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. You'll have a thought where it causes you to experiment, do better.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll never forget the panel we were on together at that conference where we brought up those tents, birds sleeping in tents and how that's anthropomorphic and not good. I didn't know if we were gonna get out of there alive.
yeah, I was a little concerned
People
too.
people are like, but my bird loves it. It's like if your bird loves something, that may be a signal that it's not good for them. We like lots of things that are bad for us, so you gotta keep you gotta have an open mind and keep learning.
Yeah.
And speaking
What
of
does love look like? What does it mean?
exactly.
Yesterday on Coffee with the Critters, I had an in-depth conversation about overstimulation and overall arousal with enrichment and how that could be concerning. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
absolutely. But
yep.
speaking of enrichment and learning, we're hosting an event in Orlando, Florida. You can go to the shop link at biobirdblends.com and click on the Avian Nutrition Summit and read more about that. Lara will be speaking. I will be speaking. We've got a really cool lineup, so you definitely want to consider that. Orlando, Florida, April 18th and 19th. And Lara has a platform that you can join, the Parrot Project. I'm part of it. It's amazing, and you need to join. Um, And I have the Team Thrive Avian Nutrition program, which includes courses like Avian Nutrition 101 and 102 that you can take and get a certificate of completion. So you can reach us at the emails there. Anything else, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I have the Parrot Project. I have numerous different memberships for different levels, different species of animals, different organizations, um, online classes, workshops. You can find out more about what I do right there at my website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com.
Yep. And if you're interested in any whole food products, you can go to biobirdblends.com also and click on the shop link. So thank you, Lara. I'm glad that you're fired up about this because I'm fired up about this, and I don't think we ever stop talking about this um, in a very enthusiastic way because we can all do better.
Definitely do better. Never stop trying to do better.
Take care, everybody.
See you, everybody.